What are you doing?
That's the song that's been playing.
What song? What are you talking about?
You don't know that song?
No, I don't.
That's my song. The song I wrote for you.
Insidious Chapter 2 is a really good sequel that's kind of forgettable. As I was rewatching this movie for my Insidious marathon that I'm doing leading up to the new one coming out in July, I couldn't help but think to myself, this is a good movie, but it just doesn't hit as hard as the first one. And why is that? Because on paper, this is still technically a good movie. It has a great opening sequence that really captivates the audience's attention and sets the tone of the film. Patrick Wilson gives an amazing performance that really reminds me of Jack Nicholson in The Shining when he's talking to himself and giving us those sadistic smiles, which by the way, I'm not saying he's better than Jack Nicholson. I'm just saying that Patrick Wilson shines through a lot more in this movie than the first one. The movie also contains all three elements of a good sequel, but for some reason, it's still not as memorable as the original. So in today's video, I want to analyze how they made a good sequel, just not a great one.
Too perfect in every single metric. Too big, too strong, too smart. I can fight too well. I'm caramel, I'm beautiful. Come through, bam, champagne, bang, yeah, supercar outside, yeah, okay, 5-star, boom, 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 first class. Cause I'm a G.
In order to make a sequel that's worthy of existence, it must contain these three key elements: continuation, escalation, and dynamic evolution. And luckily, this movie has all three of those things. So let's go ahead and take a look at the first one, continuation. This simply means that the sequel takes the efforts and triumphs of the previous movie and transforms them into the new challenges and hurdles that the characters must face. The accomplishments achieved in the previous installment serve as the foundation for the conflicts and obstacles that drive the storyline forward in the sequel. For example, the major achievement in the first movie is that Josh was able to get his son back from the further. However, whatever came back into Josh's body from the further is not actually Josh. In the second movie, the characters find themselves confronted with a fresh set of trials that build upon their past achievements, creating a seamless progression in their journey. You see, a sequel can't just forget the defining events of the first movie and do something else entirely. It has to deal with the ramifications of it all. For example, in Insidious Chapter 2, there's an ongoing investigation to Elise Rainier's murder. Her death doesn't just get tossed aside as if it never happened. Instead, it gets addressed in this movie by the police, who also add pressure to our protagonist because they obviously don't seem to really believe the whole ghost story.
Listen, I'm not interested in ghosts, Mrs. Lambert. I'm interested in the living people who create them.
If the sequel doesn't deal with the consequences of the actions taken in the first movie, then it doesn't even feel like a proper sequel at all. It'll just feel like a spin-off movie. Therefore, in order for a sequel to matter, the original movie has to matter within it. The second key element of a good sequel is its ability to amplify every aspect, creating a grander and more intense experience than before. By escalating the stakes and expanding the scope, the sequel successfully creates a sense of progression and advancement, ensuring that it feels like a step up rather than a regression. And this movie technically does that, because in the first movie we're dealing with the potential of these demons and ghosts possessing Dalton's body, but none of them have actually done it. It's just a danger that could potentially happen, and if they cross over into the real world, that could be a problem. But in the second movie, the bride in black has already successfully taken over Josh's body. So this raises the stakes since the ghost has crossed over from the further into the real world where it can harm people. However, with that being said, I still think the escalation element is where this movie didn't reach its full potential. Because technically, yes, it did escalate from the first movie. However, this is still a horror movie, which means the purpose is to scare the audience. And I don't know about you guys, but the scariest thing to me in the first movie was the red demon, who is completely absent in this movie. That's like saying you're the best soccer team in the world with Ronaldo, and next year you show up without him. It's just not the same. I'm not saying that the bride in black is not scary, because she definitely is, but imagine going from this duo to this duo. NANI? I mean, this woman is definitely not as scary as Darth Maul, okay? So in that sense, it doesn't feel like a step up, it actually feels like a step down, which is what you don't want to do in a sequel. A better example of this would be The Conjuring, which is also directed by James Wan. But in The Conjuring 2, the escalation works much better because we go from this demon in the first movie to the introduction to the infamous scary nun and we get the crooked man, which is also terrifying. So that's how you properly escalate in a horror movie. But quick side note, did you know in Insidious Chapter 2, in this scene, you can see the director of the movie James Wan on the computer screen for a brief moment. Follow me for more movie details. The third key element that every sequel needs to have is dynamic evolution. This is its ability to evolve the dynamics of the characters and their relationships, presenting them in new and refreshing ways. By exploring different facets of their personalities and introducing new dimensions to their relationships, the sequel adds freshness and intrigue to the narrative, and this evolution of characters creates a sense of realism and relatability, enabling the audience to connect with them on a deeper level. And this movie does it quite well, because in the first movie, the dynamics between the husband and wife is about trying to figure out what is going on to their son and whether or not they're willing to believe in the supernatural and let these paranormal experts into their lives. In the second movie, this dynamic is completely changed to something new. It is about trust and whether or not you can believe the person closest to you. Renee deep down knows there's something wrong with her husband, but she ignores it because she doesn't want to believe it. However, as the movie progresses, she has to address it because even the kids start noticing there's something off with their father. This is a completely new dynamic between the family. And we can even take this one step further with the mom, in that in the first movie, she's trying to convince her son that the supernatural world is real, and in the second movie, she's trying to get Renee and the kids out of the house, because she knows there's something wrong with Josh. This is a great way to make the dynamics of the characters feel like a natural progression and have their interactions feel real. Part of what made the first Insidious movie so scary was the mystery of it all. Fear of the unknown. We don't know who this old lady is, we don't know where she came from, we don't know what she's capable of, and that's part of the reason why it's so frightening. Because all we know is that she's after Josh and the rest is left to our imagination, which is the scariest of all. And the same goes for the Red Demon. We don't know that much about him in the first movie, we just know he's after Dalton's body. So the mystery of it all really lets our imaginations run wild. And part of that is lost in this movie because we get an explanation of who the Bride in Black is. And even though the backstory of the Bride in Black is sick and horrifying, it will never be as scary as our own imagination. Because even though he kidnaps women, even though he tortures them with sharp objects, even though he's a mentally ill serial killer, what you just ended up doing is humanizing him, which unfortunately takes away the power of the fear of the unknown. Because now we know what he is, what he's capable of, and what he wants. So now it's more of a disturbing threat than a scary entity. But I also think that the backstory of the Bride in Black, aka Parker Crane, is way too convoluted and is one of the weaker aspects of the film. Let me explain. I watched this guy Tyler Mowry on YouTube, and if you don't know who he is, he's a screenwriter and he also created a community of screenwriters, and he's very talented at what he does. But if you watch any of his videos, there is one clear takeaway message, which is clarity.
A good story is a clear story. A good essay is a clear essay. If you don't have clarity, if a 5-year-old can't get it, it's not clear. This is also why I harp on people for trying to create these super complex stories. Because by trying to make a super complex story, you are ostracizing, you are taking away 90% of your audience.
Your scripts and screenplays need clarity above all else. And especially in a horror movie, you want to make it clear because you don't want your audience to be confused. And I'm not saying that this movie's twist is complex, but at the same time, it's a lot of information thrown at you all at once, and it just feels weird. First, we find out that the Bride in Black is not even an old woman, it's an old man that dresses as a woman, and then we figure out that that's because he grew up with an abusive mother that would dress him as a girl and tell him that he's a girl and act like a girl, and whenever he would call himself his real name, she would slap the shit out of him and force him to call himself Marilyn, and you're just like, whoa, this is a lot. Wait a minute, the Bride in Black is not a woman? I'm still on that. So it just feels a little bit convoluted and not very clear to understand, and sometimes less is more. The acronym you need to remember is KISS. Keep it stupid simple. Don't make it more complex than it needs to be. Don't confuse the audience. Keep it stupid simple. And the only counter argument I can think of for this would be if you turn this movie into a franchise, which it is turning into a franchise, you do need to expand the lore, which is a valid counter. But to me, if you don't expand on these characters a little bit more in another film in the franchise, then it's not really worth it, because there's still a lot of questions. Like, where was Parker Crane's father in all of this? Why did his mother have this crazy obsession of making him into a girl? There's just a lot of things that really weren't touched on. So in conclusion, I think Insidious Chapter 2 was a good sequel, but definitely not a sequel that would surpass its original predecessor. But that's it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Comment down below if you guys enjoy this style of video where I make video essays, or if you prefer my old movie reviews where I talk about movies and stuff, which style you prefer to see, and I'll do more of that for you guys. And as always, subscribe if you're not already, and I'll catch you next week for Insidious Chapter 3. Peace.